Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, the chief spiritual dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, but also, I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today, I am outside the Big Apple in Brooklyn, New York, and very, very pleased to be able to get a little time to talk with the fabulous, great musician, wonderful person, Liz Rabson Schnore. Liz, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm so glad to have you visiting my borough.
It's a fabulous opportunity. I've been looking forward to talking with you. So thanks very much for the time. I can't say exactly when we first met. It must have had something to do with Blues Week or the Archie Edwards Blues Heritage Foundation, but I certainly knew your mom. I didn't go way back to the beginning of her career, but maybe a little bit later when I started going to Blues Week in the late 90s and met Gay and met Ann and Andrew Fay and all that. And I mean, your mom was just an amazing musician, guitar player, piano player, repertoire of millions of songs. So, she was fabulous, and I'm sure you had a little music in your house growing up.
Yes. Well, I don't remember meeting you either, but I'm sure it was at Blues Week. And I used to go assist my mom, especially in the later years when she was having some health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And people often say to me now, oh, I don't remember meeting you. And I always say it's because I was always with my mom, and she was the brightest shining star in the room.
Yeah.
And nobody would ever, I was just sort of an afterthought. So I met a lot of people who, don't remember meeting me, but sort of know me, that way. So
and I met George through that as well, and we did have a little conversation after she passed about promoting education, blues in the schools, that sort of thing. We can talk about that a little bit more later, but I would really like to hear, as you said, you were interesting just before we started in finding out about when music came into people's lives. I'm really interested in did you remember her playing from when you were really young, or
Oh, yeah.
what do you remember about that, and how did you start on that musical journey?
Well, there was obviously always music in my house. And I remember being the earliest memories I have, my mother playing, in the rocking chair in my room and me sitting on her lap. Mm. She was always playing. That was back when she played guitar, of course. And she always played. She took me with her to gigs. When I was little, it was a lot of coffee houses. And I remember going back and, learning how to make coffee and helping people. And really they were probably babysitting me. Also a few times her calling me up on stage with her and doing, I don't know, the various children's songs and stuff.
How old do you think you were when you first were asked up on stage?
Maybe 3 or 4.
Wow.
She took me with her pretty much all the time, I think. I did have babysitters sometimes, probably for the really late night, gigs,
mm-hmm.
but,
yeah.
Traveling a lot in the car, she didn't learn how to drive until we moved to Virginia when I was about 5. So, and that's really when we started traveling in the car a lot. And so she would play gigs on the weekends. And we would, I would sleep in the car or sleep in the back bar room with, on a shelf next to a giant can of tomatoes. Just like that. But also at home, when at some point she got a piano, and I think her idea was that I would learn how to play piano, which didn't happen. But she always had a piano in the house, and she would have her friends over, and lots of late nights of music. And I would always sort of sneak down and like listen to them play. And my mom would be like, "Oh, back to bed. What are you doing? You know, you're supposed to be in bed." And she just like lots of music in the house, and always lots of records, and she always made me play an instrument. So I started on saxophone when I was 8, and then I played clarinet for a while, and then flute, and then I didn't start playing guitar until I was about 14, and she got me jazz lessons. So then
So did you learn to read music when you were studying the horns?
yeah, I did, and I had to sight read because I was terrible at practicing. So because I would never remember to I just wouldn't practice very much, so I'd show up in class and it would be forced to sight read because I didn't know, I hadn't practiced the piece. So it was a great way to learn sight reading. And then
do you remember when you were 2 or 3 or 4? Did she just let you bang on the piano or strum a guitar or shake a shaker and that kind of thing? Did she try to teach you, or did she just kind of let you knock around on stuff?
Yeah, she always let me strum the guitar. It let me, I had like a ukulele and kazoos, and there are all kinds of instruments around that I could play with. I don't specifically remember like being a kid and playing other than like sitting at the piano, like playing around with it and always having instruments around. She encouraged me to play as much as she could. Yeah.
So then guitar at 14, and did you start in with groups? Were you playing with was it a situation where there were a lot of guys playing guitar and not so many girls, or what happened at that point?
Well, my first band, actually, I was 12. I sang. That's when we lived in Richmond, Virginia. And there was this boy, Adam Schaefer, and a couple other guys who I actually am still friends with now. Ben, whose last name I don't remember. But we did this band called Blue Moon, and we did We Are the Champions, Don't Stop.
All right.
All these like really good, it was like 1978, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we practiced in the basement of the church across from Adam's house. And I had a PA, which is probably why they asked me to be the singer, because my mom had a PA.
Right.
But it was interesting because it taught me that kids could put bands together,
Yeah.
So when I got a little older and I started playing guitar, I learned that I could play with my friends, and we could, play punk rock stuff. And that's really when I got into punk rock and all that. So to learn the DIY from Adam and Ben. And they went on to start a punk rock band. A few years later, they got really into it. And one of the first big punk rock bands in Richmond called the Degenerate Blind Boys.
Ooh, good name.
Yeah, they were a great name, and they really. I never got to see them because I didn't live in Richmond anymore. We moved to Fredericksburg, but they're historically in the Richmond punk rock scene like a big deal. So I was very proud of having known them pre-punk rock years.
So you did punk rock bands. Was that most of your teenage years? Is that what you were into?
Yeah, me and my friends, mostly just played terrible. I was the only one that knew how to play my instrument, and really into college. And my first band that really started gigging around was like right at the end of college, and that was this band called Jane His Wife. And we started getting kind of that's when I was living in Richmond again, because I went to college there. We were on the regular roster of Rockets and some of the other clubs there. And were opening for, Babes in Toyland and I don't know, different bands. So that was like my first really great like punk band that I, had some notoriety, I suppose. And after that, I started like uh, doing sort of more solo stuff, but still
Solo punk?
solo punk, but it was very blues influenced.
Uh,
And even Jane, his wife, like I wrote most of the music for it. And some of the other punk rock bands would make fun of us because my songs were often like had minor keys in them and they were weird sounding.
Whoa.
I know. So I played in a couple of different bands like that. Not all of them were that successful, but we tried, Then, but I started getting more and more into roots, sort of like by the like 90s, and I lived in New Orleans and played around there. And
Did your mom have an influence on that? I mean, she knew every root song there was, probably.
oh yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons why I took to roots so easily is I already knew most of the songs because I'd been listening to them my whole life.
Yeah.
So blues, it's my default.
Mm-hmm.
It's the default music in my, some people have church music or some people have the Beatles, but the blues is my default music. I'm interested in a lot of different kinds of folk music, but blues is really the base that everything comes from for me.
I agree. Folk music, acoustic music, the finger picking guitar, that sort of stuff just really turns me on. What do you think it is about that sort of music that you ended coming home to, in a sense? I mean,
when I sing it and when I perform it, it just comes out of me naturally. Like I don't have to force it. But I do. There's like a time, like sometimes when you are performing a song, you just really connect with the people you're playing with. It's like you hit that note and it's just draws people in, and it just making that connection with people on another level just feels so good. I have no way to explain why it's good, but it just does feel good to connect with people like that. And also with people you're playing with, not just people you're playing for.
And so has that been sort of you've continued on that trajectory of roots, folk, blues? That's what you play now? Pretty much you're in several different bands, I think, on you.
Yeah, I mean, the Queens of Everything.
That's a great name, by the way. I really love that name.
It's a big name, and we are growing into it. We're on the long path of a band. We've been together for 5 years, but we were all originally, Jen and I were single mothers, and Arminda was a newlywed, and now she's a mother, and our kids are grown up. So we've fit playing music in together. So even though we've been together for 5 years, I would say that we're progressing slowly but steadily and growing as well. But the Queens of Everything are, we do, blues, old time, country blues, jug band. And it's really mostly has to do with our individual interests. Like I have a blues background. Arminda is more of an old time background. And Jen, I would sort of say more like country influenced. So we've kind of mixed it all. And we've really become, the jug band has become very important to us lately. And maybe because that mixes those styles as well. Like that seems to be something a lot of jug bands do. So we just sort of fell into that. And also because Arminda plays jug and Jen plays washboard, but we never thought we would be a jug band. Like it just, jug and washboard and me playing harmonica were just they were the instruments that needed for certain songs. So that's how we ended up falling under that category.
Yeah, great tune, great variety of wonderful types of music. Yeah. And now we kind of get into this when you talked about connecting with the audience, I was thinking, well, that's that power, that essence of music that I don't know, maybe it's what you're going for, what you're searching for, but how do you see that power? It's obviously affected your life. It's affected people your friends, and you affect audiences and other things. How do you describe that? What is that all about, do you think?
Well, my mother was very big into mentoring people into music. She was an educator. She was very interested in blues in the schools and teaching people, about blues, about an American form of music that really belonged to our culture, and like sort of spreading the word of blues. And from her example, I learned that by touching people through music, like teaching them that they can play music too, it really enriches their lives. And I've found myself getting very involved in like the ukulele groups.
Mm-hmm.
I co-run the Brooklyn Ukes, and I run the Clinton Hill Ukulele Social Club. And I try to go to as many ukulele festivals and workshops and just really sit down with people, like especially in jams, because people are afraid to make a wrong note. They're like, what if it doesn't sound good? And I get up and play the ukulele in a jam with like a bunch of guitars, and the ukuleles go, oh, I could do that too. And these are people who sometimes are new to playing any kind of music. And when they realize that they can do it too, I've seen so many people, the light goes on and their lives are changed because they can now play music with other people and touch lives in a way that just, again, is on another plane, outside of your life. It takes you outside of like your phone and the TV and your computer and your job, and you just sit down with people, with friends in the real world, connecting.
I totally understand what you're talking about. I fiddled around with harmonica for a lot of my life, but didn't really play until there was one time when I was trying to jam, probably in the wrong key, to Jay Giles' band, Magic Dick, the harmonica player.
Yeah.
And somebody said, "Oh, I love blues harmonica." I'm like, "Oh, that's what this is. That's what I need to do." And it really did change my life when I realized I could, get some harmonicas, go to the jam at Food for Thought, the DC Blues Society.
Oh, yeah.
Meet Miles Spicer. He says, "You got to go to Blues Week. You got to go to the barbershop." And it's been it's just such an amazing, I don't know, transformation. It just opens you up or something. It's fabulous.
Is Food for Thought still there?
No, it closed down.
Oh, I used to play there too.
Did you?
I lived in DC for about a year, around 89 or 90. And Food for Thought was one of the places I used to play solo. And I used to do it was like when I was transitioning from punk into roots music. So I did kind of this, a lot of original tunes or blue. I would take like Memphis Mini tunes and kind of rough them up. I don't know how to put it better than that, but
it was a great spot. I remember
really
going
fun.
and finding out you needed different keys of harmonicas.
Yeah.
And then which key you needed for which song. And then I remember being up there one time, somebody said, "Now when I put my hand up, that means we're about to end the song." I'm like, "Whoa, how's that? Who knew?" But
there are hand signals.
But those are the kinds of things that if you want to play, you kind of need to know some of those basics. And that's what you're talking about, really bringing to people or helping them learn.
Yeah. Well, you can see it too. Sometimes people say they'll watch you play music, and then you can see that there's an interest in it.
And so I know one thing that we have in common that we talked about was, as I kind of alluded to earlier is your mom's interest in blues education of children, and you've done some work in that area, working with the Blues Foundation, et cetera. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as some folks know already, but maybe not everybody, my mother was very interested in blues in the schools, and she taught all over the country. She would go for 1 week and teach elementary school children about blues as the history of blues, and she would do this whole program over the week where they would write a song and they would make instruments and all kinds of different things to give kids the understanding of, again, that they can make music themselves. The Ann Rabson Fund is an organization that my father and I set up after my mother passed away, and the goal is to foster an interest in blues music through music education programs. We've done a lot of sponsoring young people to go to various music camps, including the Centrum Blues Camp in Port Townsend, the Augusta Heritage Festival in Elkins, West Virginia, the Pine Top Perkins camp. That's wonderful. And my mother was an educator there as well and was involved. It was good friends with Pine Top. And she was also very involved with blues in the schools herself, and we'd like to start eventually hiring musicians to go in and teach in elementary schools as well. But that's a much bigger program, and something we've talked about with Barbara Newman, who's the head of the National Blues Foundation. It's a big jump from what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, eventually, we'll get there. Right now, we're focusing on keeping the blues alive, making sure that young people have access to, the educational materials, instruments, other blues musicians who can teach, who are active musicians currently.
Yeah, who could teach sort of a 12-bar blues and what some of the old songs were and that kind of thing.
And the history and their history, because a lot of older musicians have really, have a lot to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
that would certainly be something that I think a lot of people would be interested in doing.
Yeah.
You've been involved in music your whole life, and you talked about connecting and sort of the power of music in that way. And we live in challenging times. I kind of believe that music is like, the grandmommy of everything. And it's so powerful. I've just been, smitten and awed at the power of music and what it is, what it can do. Do you have thoughts about, what we, you, people, perspectives we can have, try to teach things we can do? I mean, you're out there playing. That's part of it. Any other thoughts about that?
Well, I just feel that connecting through music is in person is a way to, enrich people's lives. They, if everybody sits in their homes by themselves in front of their computers and don't have human interaction, they lose touch with reality, and it's harder. There are more people that have unsatisfied lives, whereas if you find ways to connect in person in real time outside of the internet and the information that's fed to us through the media and all that stuff, it's so much better. And I think people need to turn away from the media and, get back to dealing with each other in person. Some of the other musical projects I've been involved in, one of them has sort of sparked an interesting sort of group of friendships. It's I play every Sunday at the Douglas. And it started kind of as a jam, but we've ended up being, like a solid core group of people who play together. And it's really such a mix of different styles. So it's blues and there's a lot of country in there. So there's, Hank Williams thrown in. And then there's Irish music, which I never really knew a lot about. But I made friends with this gentleman, Ken Curtin, who's been around the folk music scene for a long time, and really, he's really into Union songs and murder ballads and this, a lot of Irish music. And I've learned a lot about that style, which isn't something I knew much about. And I played with him at St. Patrick's Day last year, and I sang the song Old Triangle, which is an a cappella tune. And somebody came up to me who knew nothing about me, and he said, "I love the way you sang that. It was almost like a blues song." I thought it was hilarious because he didn't know that that's the background that I have.
Yeah, there's a bar restaurant in Halifax named the Old Triangle.
Yeah.
It has great music there. I didn't realize it was from a song.
Oh yeah.
You know what? I remember
yeah.
something I was going to ask you.
Okay.
You're a photographer,
Yes.
and I saw on the internet, you've done photography for a long time, so you're a musician and a photographer. Maybe do you mind talking a little bit about the type of photography that you've done or you're doing, or what you aim for, something? But I'm also going to ask, after you say that, what are the connections, the similarities, the differences with music and the art of photography?
I like to think creatively. I need to have a creative outlet regardless of what I'm doing in my life. And because there's a day job and I raised a kid and did a lot of stuff, but I always had to have something creative going. When I first moved to New York, I had a very hard time finding anybody to play music with. I played at home, I always said, for my cat and the kid, but for some reason I had a hard time. Part of it too is having a kid. You can't go out at night,
Right.
But photography was something I could do. And it was really after September 11th in the city where I said to myself, what's the thing that I've always wanted to do, but I couldn't do until now, and for some reason, photography popped into my head. And so I started taking classes at Pratt Institute, and I got very interested in photography. So traditional photography with film, and I got a Pentax K1000 and just started going around the city and photographing things, and had all kinds of series of things. The most recent show that I had of these instruments, which is sort of, I came up with this idea that I wanted to do still live, but I wanted to do it with musical instruments because I didn't see that a lot.
Right, I did see some of those pictures. Yeah, they're very cool pictures of old, new, all kinds of instruments.
Yeah, and that series. It's actually pretty old now. It's more than 10 years old. And really, in the past 5 years, since I've gotten very into playing music, I've not been photographing as much. I think maybe my brain just kind of works that way. I get really deeply into something for a while.
I hear you.
And then I get deeply into something else. But I was deeply into music for a long time and took a break from it for a few years while I had my daughter. And then, have gotten back into it. And I'm sure I haven't thrown any of my cameras out, or I still have the ability to do both. I just have a limited amount of time.
Right.
So, but one day.
And they are, music and art are two different art forms. And I guess there's, drama and movies and sculpture and, knitting and crocheting. I mean, there's so many art forms, but how would you say that there are similarities between photography and music, or key differences? You're not there's not sound involved in photography. It's just visual. It can be emotional, but maybe not the same as music. I'm just curious what you think about that.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of levels that there are things that they connect. If you really go, down to like the atomic level, there's waves, right? So you have light
Right.
waves and sound waves. Then there's, as far as similarities about the artistic output, photography is a completely quiet, or lack of sound format, but it requires you're telling a story, right? You tell a story in a song, you tell a story
Right.
in a photograph. It's just using different tools to do it. I think very similar. The output is similar.
And the audience reaction is, I guess it's just so profound, when you hear a song and you can be crying or,
Right.
anything can happen with any kind of music, but photography affects people, but it's just maybe more subtle.
Maybe. I mean,
don't know.
some photographs make you cry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Well, that's
can-
true.
It's, photographers, create landscapes, create, spaces that you can really incorporate into, your brain. I don't know how, I'm not saying it right, but, I think maybe that's a similar, it's about the experience that you have that from the creator,
Yeah, being in the now. I mean, it kind of solidifies the now from a two-dimensional perspective, but it can take you back to that moment, similar to the way music can, I suppose.
Yeah. I know a lot of artists who are musicians and, a lot of creative people, do multiple things. I'm kind of there's a word, the multi-potentialite,
Huh.
There are people in the world who specialize, and the world needs specialists, but not everybody has to be a specialist in one thing. Some people are good at doing a lot of different things, and that's one of my gifts is I'm good at doing a lot of different things. I like to say it like I'm a Renaissance woman,
Nice. Yeah.
because I just enjoy doing a lot of different things.
Well, you certainly are doing a lot of different things. I'm sure you've touched a lot of people through your music and your photography, and who knows what's next. I mean, the queens of if you're hanging out with a group called the Queens of Everything, you got unlimited potential. We need more queens of everything. So,
Absolutely.
well,
And you guys, we'll be playing December 16th at Sunny's Bar in Red Hook.
all right.
We can't wait.
Okay, that's going to be great.
Yeah.
Well, check it out, everybody. Liz, thanks so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll meet again soon.
I can't wait to see you.
All righty. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So Please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.